Hi everyone, Adrian Groenewald here, Me Vision Academy, and this is our Successful Leader Award presentation to a very special man who needs no introduction. It's Bryan Habana, rugby icon, recently nominated or appointed as chairman of the Laureus Sports for Good Foundation South Africa. He's also a chief client officer at Pay Me Now Group, so he's a businessman, and that's part of why we have him here. Transferring your rugby life into leadership, business life is quite an interesting transition. But very, very important to mention, the Sean Daisel Bester nominated him. So, Bryan, a formal welcome.
Lovely to be here. Still extremely humbled that Deshaun put through the nomination, and even more humbled to be receiving this award. And looking forward to the chat and seeing where I've come to in my, I want to say, very short journey from a leadership perspective, particularly in the corporate space. But really humbled and privileged to be chatting to you today.
It's obviously a great, we do this in humility, and we're grateful for your acceptance. I'm going to share and do the formalities first. So here's the actual award, recognition for successful leadership, awarded to Bryan Habana. For at least this, Bryan, and there are specific words also from your nominator: consistently leading self and others successfully, your successful leadership and example on the rugby field, and now as a business leader, and specifically that capacity to transfer those skills effectively. People think it's easy, but it's not necessarily easy. Being respectful, mindful, leading with humility, and then also leadership that is grounded, filled with inspiration, and creates confidence and safety in those you lead. Those are not just words, those are really powerful compliments from your nominator. And it's always my privilege as one of the co-founders of Me Vision Academy to sign this. And that's our slogan, a journey to best self. We think you show that journey to best self very clearly with what you've achieved in your life. So Bryan, a formal congratulations. And then I'll ask you the question after that. Well done.
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adrian. I think to Deshaun, those words mean immensely much. I think as a person, you try, and I've always tried to make an impact in whichever form or way I can do. And very fortunate that rugby gave me a great platform. This transition chapter that I'm now in, 6 years on from retiring, has been nothing short of amazing. A lot of learning, self-learning, a lot of unlearning in terms of giving myself the ability to learn in what is a very different environment. And as much as sport, in my opinion, gives you a few skill sets that are integral in success, being able to adapt them appropriately in the corporate world has been something that I've needed to learn really well. And looking at some of those statements that Deshaun made and think about where my journey has got, it definitely fills me with a huge amount of pride. That being said, I still think I got a very long way to go. So I'm not quite sure if the recognition is a little bit premature, but grateful that, all the effort that one puts in trying to make this world a better place is seen, heard, and felt by others around you.
Yeah, and there kicks in the humility at the end of your statement. Very nice. Bryan, let's ask you the key question that we've asked from, presidents in the last few years to really powerful people, but also less known leaders. What have you discovered is the essence, would you say, of successful leadership? Your self-discovery, but also maybe you've been around some great leaders in your time. What would you say describes successful leadership?
So I think successful leadership is and we actually had our head of ops, had a great quote, or he has sort of a motivational Monday that happens on a Monday, and says that good leaders are the ones you want to follow. And when you look at yourself, would you follow you? If yes, brilliant. If no, why not? And do you see yourself as someone that you can follow, or do you see yourself as someone that is harmful? And I think in sort of that statement, understanding, what skill sets individually you need to bring uniquely to the fore to be I think successful leaders definitely have a vision, and it's having the ability to appropriately communicate that vision to those that need to follow you. And if you look at all of the great business leaders of the world, every one of them has got there because of a team. So understanding what that vision is and strategically putting that vision into place. A lot of the times it requires a little bit of integrity in how that goes. For me, in my leadership journey, from a rugby perspective, I removed emotion from decision-making processes on the field because physiologically that's what got the best out of me. Now, all of a sudden, in a business context, I've got to be emotionally engaged. I've got to be empathetic. I've got to be understanding and, what my employees are needing from me for them to be given a why, which I think is really important. And therein lies a massive ability from a communication skill set perspective to bring that strategic vision and thinking into place, letting everybody understand that, while having this emotional engagement around empathy and engagement with your staff. And, look at a lot of the most successful business leaders, people felt very safe in their space, but also very much aligned with what they were trying to achieve or the vision that they held dear. And I think in that, a lot of the times you're probably looking at the need for accountability. So as a leader, being accountable to yourself, but then also being accountable in the ways and means of what that vision needs to be encompassed by those that are with you on the journey, which I think is important. Not all leaders are inspiring and motivating in their own right, but they have this unique ability to bring people together to try achieve a vision with certain skill sets. Rassie has really caught an emotional environment in South African sport at the minute, mostly because of his honesty. He's been someone that many South Africans have been able to relate to. He's been very transparent in his dealings, not only with the players, but the whole of South Africa. And I think in that, you become emotionally in tuned and engaged with the vision that is being put forward. But that accountability, that honesty and transparency becomes really easy in, how people see you as a leader.
Bryan, thank you for that. I was going to ask you but first of all, I remember years ago a conversation with Francois Pienaar, who's an icon himself, also trying to transition from rugby to being a leader out there in the business, corporate environment, wherever. And saying it's not easy because, whenever you go into a meeting, rugby comes up first. There's a rugby conversation. It's all about rugby, and you want to get to business. You've got to get down to business sometimes, and you've got to move away from talking about rugby, especially after a weekend like this. Did you find that challenging? Because you're you're rugby. That's who you are. You're rugby, and you weren't just a good rugby player. You were really iconic, like Cheslin is becoming. Like that. So was that difficult, or did you just ease into it? And that specific part, you said some brilliant things about emotional. How you treated your emotions before as a rugby player, and now as a leader. I mean, that's a wonderful comment that I found fascinating. But how did you find that transition?
So I said earlier, I think for me, any successful person, no matter whether you're a professional athlete, whether you want to do ballroom dancing, whether you want to be in politics, whether you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, there's sort of 5 key principles that I think are non-negotiable. The first one being discipline. And as an athlete, discipline comes really easy because no one has to motivate you to be able to get paid to do something you love and get paid really well. When you're living out a hobby and the love you have for something, that's easy. You then, as much as you need to be disciplined in almost every sphere of your life, you need to be willing to work hard. And hard work for most professional athletes are a really integral differentiator between those that are average and those that become the best. But also those margins between the best and the great is just so minimal. And in those two sort of first elements, most successful people are disciplined and they're willing to work hard. And this whole sense of, particularly in the work environment that I'm now finding myself in, the whole work-life balance, I think it's a weird conundrum for me because any successful person unfortunately can't be balanced, because balance in its pure form is an equilibrium. And if you have 3 silos in your life, work, family, personal, and you're giving one silo balance, you're then not giving it 66% of your being. And as a professional athlete, you had a very skewed imbalance in your life, because if you want to be the best, almost every waking second of the day for me while I was playing rugby was focused on what I needed to do to be the best. And even though I potentially had an off day and I went to go play golf or did something relaxing, that was part of the mental element that I needed to break away to make sure that when I get onto the field for 80 minutes on a Saturday, my body and my mind was in the best position possible to physiologically be the best. So balance is sort of the skewed concept that we've now brought into this whole environment, which if you want to be successful, balance is unfortunately the last thing you can have. I think I've heard more recently that this saying of a work-life harmony is much more in tune with what successful people mean. And a lot of people come to the end of their life and they say they wish they had spent more time doing X, Y, and Z, but that would have come at a cost of something different. So, if you're willing to be disciplined, if you're willing to work hard, generally success comes your way. I think within a successful sporting career, you've got to be resilient because adversity comes across your path many a times. And if you're not willing to understand, you need to build up a sense of resilience. The fourth element of perseverance isn't there. So all of a sudden you got discipline, you got hard work, you got resilience, you got perseverance, and then that element of communication. And I think for me in the transition period, to your point, Adrian, going from, and I use the analogy of, if I went into the sheds at halftime, the change room at halftime playing against the All Blacks, and I look around the room, there were 14 other male CEOs sitting next to me, the best of the best in their position. I didn't have to tell John Smith or Bismarck Duplessis how to throw a ball in a lineup. I didn't have to tell Urs Durant how to scrum. I definitely wasn't going to tell Bucky Spuerta how to be physical. Awesome. I couldn't call a lineup like Victor Matfield. I couldn't kick a ball like Farid Dupree and Percy Montgomery or Frans Steyn. So I just had to do my job as best possible. And I think therein the unlearning, all of a sudden I find myself in a fintech environment where I've got 17 direct reports, 15 of which are female, who think differently, emotionally are different, physiologically are different. And all of a sudden, I'm now needing to be a statement of reliability for them in their own personal growth. So I think most successful leaders, and for me, this transition period has been a big showcase of the need to unlearn, to be able to learn and become better in a very different environment. The transition period has been very good to me, but it's also been challenging in many aspects because you become accustomed to a very disciplined structure in your life. From a rugby perspective, you got a program on a Sunday night telling you what exactly your week looks like. You've been given the clothes that you're going to be wearing at every session. Your flights have been booked. Your program logistically has been managed. The buses that you're going to be traveling on. And all of a sudden you get into this corporate environment and the pressure that you need to put on yourself as much as you get into, potential sales pitch or business engagement, and rugby is the icebreaker. That ability to make sure that the way you in tune with what is needed becomes really important. So what I have learned in this transition period, more so than not, is that unlearning, is a phenomenal building block to learn. And that skill set that rugby has taught me then now needs to be adaptable or appropriately adapted to this different environment, which is good. So yes, rugby is sometimes the icebreaker. And when you've done it to the extent that I have, it becomes a very easy icebreaker to talk about. When you're physically at a stadium, like I was fortunate enough to be at, witnessing Evan Etzebeth, become the most capped Springbok of all time this past weekend, it becomes really easy to have that icebreaker. But then it's being able to learn the mechanisms of moving from an icebreaker into a business pitch, a sales engagement or business engagement for whatever the purpose of the meeting is. So it's always great because you can get your foot in the door. What I have though learned is that as much as you can get your foot in the door, you need to be able to make the door open so that you can walk in, because that icebreaker doesn't open the door for you. It just gets your foot in the door. So there has been a lot of learning and there has been a lot of unlearning, to be able to build up this transition period.
Bryan, where are you on the ranking of how many caps? You're quite high up, aren't you?
So I'm third. Yes.
Did you go third now? Or
no, I went third 3 weeks ago already. No, so Evan, I was tied with Evan 3 weeks ago when he played against New Zealand, and then obviously went on to break Victor's record this past weekend.
That's right, Victor on top of it. I've got two more questions for you, and maybe it's more just discussions. One is, and I hope I don't get this wrong. We can always cut it out if we have to. Years ago, I sat with Heineke Meyer, And
Yeah.
he mentioned that there was a critical conversation with, I think he may have mentioned you and Victor Matfield, in terms of sitting you down saying, you have all the talent, you're starting to become famous now, you're starting to become really good, but now you must set your sight on becoming a real big icon rather than embrace the fame and the money and the popularity. You've got to put that aside and now focus on a bigger dream almost. I mean, those weren't the words, but just a very difficult feedback session in which he had to tell you, hey, come down to earth, be humble, focus on something bigger. Do you recall that? Or was that another player that he mentioned to me that he had this very important conversation with?
I think a few coaches had to mention that to me over the course of my career, not just Heineke. I think the first meeting I actually had with Heineke was back in 2004. I was a young 21-year-old who was, I want to say, in a bit of the wilderness of the rugby landscape about what the future held. And I've been at the Lions, for the better part of the last 4 years, and just made the S under 21 World Cup squad that went really well. Got back, and I was a little bit confused about where I wanted to go. I got included into the home leg of the Tri Nations back then, and Jake White sort of brought me in, having never played Super Rugby before. And then a few weeks later, I had to make a decision about whether I wanted to stay at the Lions or move to the Bulls. And I sat with Heineke Meyer and Ian Swartz, the then manager at, I think it was the Protea Hotel in Midrand. And Heineke sort of told me about this vision that he had about where the Bulls were going. And, when your world, which is a very small world, but it seemed like your whole world, which was Johannesburg for 21 years of my life, potentially going to get ripped from you, you actually don't, you become very confused as to what the future holds. But I think it was that first meeting with Heineke where I had to buy into the vision that he had about where he wanted to go with his Bulls team, about how he felt my contribution could aid to the Bulls becoming the first South African team to win a Super Rugby competition, and creating a belief within me, while being extremely, I think the word is EQ, emotionally intelligent, in his way of inspiring and motivating me, made me move from the Lions to the Bulls. All of a sudden, everyone said, it's the biggest mistake of your life. The Bulls only play a 10-man brand of rugby. You're never going to score the try. You're never going to get your hands on the ball. You're going to be chasing Farida Priya, Derek Hougaard, and Morné Steyn's kicks the whole day. And 2 years later, we go on and we win the Super Rugby competition. And I get to score the winning try, and to then see a vision that Heineke had 3 years prior come to fruition, and what he meant. And again, Jake White was very much the same, brought me in, told me to learn as much as I could from the likes of a Percy Montgomery, a Brayton Paulser, Ossuran, John Smith, Victor Matfield, but also said that, it's easy to be a one-time Springbok. And I think for me, the most pivotal moment of my career, the most amazing moment, was getting to represent South Africa for the very first time back on the 20th of November 2004 against the then world champions England at the home of rugby. And scoring a try with my first touch of the ball in international rugby was pretty special. It could have been bettered had we gone on to win that game, but we got absolutely annihilated by England 32-16. But it was in that moment of getting to experience the privilege and honor of representing South Africa, representing my country, that I realized I don't just want to do this once. And that mentality of understanding, and Heineke Meyer, had this phenomenal motivational piece around the Kaizen principle of life, continuous improvement. And I think some of the great leaders are also some of the biggest self-critics. And it's important to have people in your stable that can have positive criticism to build you up and not to break you down. And a lot of the times that you spoke about, Adrian, coaches were understanding what is needed because, as a young 21, 25-year-old, what do you know about life actually, right? And because they've been around and just keeping you humble, keeping you grounded, but also having those support structures around you that did the same. So Heineke would have probably said that to me, but I reckon each and every coach that I had along my journey, to becoming the rugby player I was, had to have that chat at some point because, as a person, we tend to feed into the media, we tend to feed into, the goings-ons, and, that then sometimes does lead to, to cataclysm.
Now, Bryan, last thing. We had our little rugby discussion before we went into formalities today. And the thing you said to me was, this is no doubt the best rugby team we've ever had. And it might be that the world has ever had, but certainly what South Africa's ever had. Now, my question to you is, there's a lot of skill involved, there's a lot of planning involved, there's a hell of a lot of things involved in this becoming the greatest rugby team ever. How much has leadership to do with this? Getting to
Everything.
everything.
Leadership's got everything to this. Firstly, you look at Rassie Erasmus, coming in after what was a very dire time with South African rugby. I don't believe there was a lot of alignment between Alex Coetzee and SA Rugby when he took over, and there's a lot of difficulties that weren't able to be overcome. Rassie came in, all of a sudden, a leadership alignment both between Rassie and SA Rugby. All of a sudden, there's a leadership alignment between Rassie and when he announced Siya Kolisi to be the captain. And within that, you had the likes of an Evan Etzebeth, Andre Pollard, Peter Steph du Toit, leaders in their own right. And people tend to forget that Peter Steph du Toit was the first Springbok captain under Rassie Erasmus in 2018 when that team took on Wales in Washington. So I think alignment in a leadership structure from the top down, but then also allowing a communication platform from the bottom up. Rassie has been very blunt, honest, and transparent in letting everyone know where they stand. It was then with everyone knowing where they stand, buying into what the vision is. And leadership played and is playing an integral role in the success that the Springbok team is achieving. There has not been one player that's put himself ahead of the team. Rassie has, even stated in Chasing the Sun that Siya Kolisi isn't bigger than the Springboks. And put it pretty bluntly that South Africa is bigger than the Springboks, and that's something that this team has taken to heart. I think the transparency and honesty that Rassie has put forward has made a massive impact in how the individuals within this team have taken accountability, which I think has been really important. And in so doing, leadership has shone through in each and every individual, because leadership isn't just from the coach, the president, the captain. Leadership is each and every individual taking accountability for the role that they play within the organization. And to my earlier point of asking, would you follow you? Each and every individual needs to say that. And, if I look at our team back in 2007, John Smith had this phenomenal way of engaging, being emotionally intelligent, empathetic. But John Smith always used to say to us, when you go to bed at night and you look at yourself in the mirror, are you proud of the person looking back at you? And I think if we look at this current Springbok team and the way they've all taken accountability into being leaders in their own right and contributing to the success, not of their own individual part, but of the greater collective of the Springbok rugby team, leadership has been a non-negotiable. And again, people only sometimes see leadership as that top tier, but it's each and every individual playing their part in that leadership journey for the greater collective to be good and successful.
Bryan, what a brilliant analysis. I can't wait to extract that. And we're certainly looking at an award for Rassie as well. But well done. Thank you for your time. One would never think you're just a rugby player, the way you speak. I can see why Deshaun nominated you without any doubt. And thank you for the difference you're making. I mean, through the Laureate Sports for Good Foundation and lots of other things, no doubt, that you're doing. So we look forward to sharing this. And again, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And again, extremely humbled and privileged to be receiving this award. And Deshaun, I owe you a coffee the next time we meet for the board meeting.